I never imagined betrayal could sound like laughter. Standing in my own hallway, hearing my wife's voice weave between four men's in our bedroom, I felt my world crack, but I refused to shatter with it. My name is Finn Myers, and I'm 34 years old. These days, I wake up alone in the house my father left me, drinking coffee from the mug he gave me on my wedding day. Each creak of the floorboards used to comfort me. Now they remind me of footsteps that shouldn't have been there, of champagne glasses that weren't mine on the nightstand, of text messages lighting up Jesse's phone like a slot machine. My father taught me that strength isn't measured in volume, it's found in patience and precision. Jessie thought she could explain away that night. She was wrong. Before I go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow I will share a story you don't want to miss. But let me start from the beginning. I remember every detail of that night. The scrape of my key in the front door lock, the unfamiliar coat thrown carelessly over the banister, and then the sounds. Laughter spilled down our hallway, masculine voices mixing with a familiar feminine giggle that turned my blood to ice. I'd heard Jessie laugh like that before, but never with other men, never in our bedroom. My hand found my phone before my mind could fully process what was happening. Years of my father's measured wisdom steadied my fingers as I opened the camera app and hit record. The carpet muffled my steps as I moved closer, letting the video capture every second, every sound. "Come on, baby, show us that trick again," a deep voice urged, followed by more laughter. I counted 4 distinct male voices, plus Jessie's playful responses. The sounds painted a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. Remember how your parents told you to trust your gut? Mine was screaming, but I forced myself to breathe, to think, to document. When I finally stepped into the doorway, the scene hit me like a physical blow. Jessie sprawled across our marriage bed, silk robe slipping off her shoulder, surrounded by 4 men I'd never seen before. Empty champagne bottles, my champagne, littered the nightstand. Their phones lay scattered among the mess, screens lighting up with notifications like guilty consciences. The laughter died instantly. One of the men actually fell off the bed. "Finn!" Jessie's eyes went wide, but then, and this is what still gets me, she tried to smile, like I'd caught her opening Christmas presents early instead of destroying our marriage. "We can explain." My voice came out steady, surprising even me. "Explain fast, because right now I don't see how this ends without you proving me wrong." The men started grabbing their things, faces flushed with embarrassment or shame or both. I kept filming, noting details almost mechanically. Brown loafers by the door, a silver watch left on the dresser, cologne that didn't belong to me hanging heavy in the air. Jessie clutched her robe closed, that fake smile cracking around the edges. "Baby, it's not what you think. 4 strange men in my bedroom isn't what I think?" I felt the rage building behind my ribs, but I channeled it into observation, into evidence. Their phones kept lighting up with messages, probably from worried wives or girlfriends wondering where they were. I made sure to catch those flashes on video, too. The men shuffled toward the door, mumbling apologies I barely heard. I stepped aside to let them pass, my phone tracking their exit. Each footstep down our stairs was another nail in the coffin of my marriage. Jessie moved toward me then, her face transforming into something desperate and determined. "Finn, wait. There's something I need to tell you." "Name them," I said, keeping my phone steady. The camera caught everything. Jessie's defiant posture, the guilty shuffling of the men, the mess of our bedroom that would never feel clean again. "No." Jessie lifted her chin, trying to project confidence, but I caught the tremor in her voice. She was used to getting her way with tears or sweet talk, not this time. One of the men, tall, wearing an expensive watch that probably came from my joint account, muttered, "We're leaving." He edged toward the door, not meeting my eyes. The others followed like sheep, their expensive shoes clicking against the hardwood floors my father and I had installed together one summer long ago. I kept filming as they filed past, 4 faces I'd remember forever, though I wished I could forget. 4 men who thought nothing of entering another man's home, his sanctuary, and desecrating it with their presence. Jessie rushed forward the moment they cleared the doorway, her silk robe whispering across the floor. "Finn, if you love me, you'll hear me out." Her hand reached for my arm, but I stepped back. The desperate plea in her voice might have worked before, back when I thought I knew who she was. "You burned that bridge the second they walked in." My voice stayed level, though my chest felt like it might crack open. Every step they took across our threshold, every laugh I heard down that hallway, every lie you're about to tell me. They're friends! Her voice rose, taking on that wounded tone she used when she wanted sympathy. Nothing happened. You're making assumptions. Friends don't sneak into married women's bedrooms with champagne. I kept recording, knowing every word mattered. Friends don't scatter like roaches when the husband comes home. You're trying to make me look bad. Her tactics shifted. Now came the threats, right on schedule. I could tell people things about you, Finn. Things that would make them see you differently. I almost laughed. Go ahead. Tell them how you brought 4 men into our bedroom. Tell them how you're threatening me for catching you. I'm sure that'll work out great for you. She tried bargaining next, her voice honey-sweet. Baby, we can work through this. We can get counseling. I'll do anything. Anything except tell me their names? I watched her face fall. Anything except admit what you've done? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Jessie's mouth worked soundlessly, her usual scripts failing her. Finally, she turned away, arms crossed tight around herself. The anger radiated off her in waves, but I didn't care. I had the truth on video, and her silence said more than any confession could. Standing there in our violated bedroom, watching her retreat into sullen silence, I knew this was just the opening move in whatever game she planned to play. Jessie never admitted defeat. She just changed tactics. But I had evidence now. I had truth. I kept filming as she stormed into the bathroom, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the wedding photos on our walls. Photos that now felt like props in a play I hadn't known I was starring in. The next morning hit like a hangover, though I hadn't touched a drop. I sat in Russell Cho's office, watching him review the video on my phone. The morning light slanted through his blinds, creating bars across his desk that felt appropriate for what we were discussing. Play that part again, Russell said, leaning forward. His tie was perfectly knotted, his manner calm, exactly what I needed after a sleepless night of replaying every moment, every laugh I'd heard down that hallway. The memory of my father teaching me to sand wood in the garage drifted back, his voice steady. Take your time, son. Rushing only means doing it twice. I rewound to where Jessie stood in her robe, the 4 men filing past me. Russell's expression didn't change, but his fingers drummed once on his desk, the only tell I'd learned to read in 15 years of friendship. You remember the postnup she signed? He asked, setting my phone down carefully. When Dad left me the house? The papers had seemed like a formality then. Jessie had signed them without hesitation, all smiles and understanding. Russell nodded, pulling a file from his drawer. Section 4.2 specifically addresses infidelity. If proven, he tapped the document, she forfeits any claim to the property. No exceptions. My shoulders loosened for the first time in 24 hours. The video is a good start. Russell held up a hand. But there's something else you need to see. He slid another folder across his desk, this one thick with bank statements. I had my assistant pull these this morning. You might want to brace yourself. I opened the folder. Row after row of withdrawals jumped out at me, all marked as gifts. Thousands of dollars, spread across months. My stomach clenched as dates clicked into place. Nights Jessie had been out with friends or helping her sister move. That's over $18,000, Russell said quietly. All from your joint account. The ground seemed to shift under me. I gripped the edge of Russell's desk, feeling the smooth wood under my fingers. Wood like Dad would have chosen, solid and real while my world spun. Those dates, I said, my voice rough. Second Tuesday last month, she said she was at a wine tasting. And that weekend in March, when she visited her college roommate, Russell finished. Look at the ATM locations. I did. None were anywhere near where she'd claimed to be. Each withdrawal matched up with a different story, a different lie. The betrayal wasn't just personal anymore. It was financial sabotage, methodical, and planned. She's been... I couldn't finish the sentence. Buying their silence, maybe, Russell suggested. Or funding whatever this is. Either way, she's been systematically draining your accounts. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. Dad's voice came back to me. Trust, but verify. He'd been talking about measuring twice before cutting wood, but the principle felt bitter and true now. How do we prove it? I asked, gripping the folder so tight my knuckles went white. Russell leaned back, his face grave. That's the thing, Finn. We need hard evidence connecting these withdrawals to those men. Bank records, text messages, receipts, anything that shows the scope of what she's doing. Without it, he spread his hands. She could claim these were legitimate expenses. We need to prove the sabotage. Every betrayal leaves a trail. Over the next 3 days, Russell and I followed Jesse's digital footprints like hunters tracking prey. The evidence mounted hour by hour, each new discovery turning my stomach even as it strengthened my resolve. "Look at this," I said, pointing to my laptop screen. We'd set up in Russell's conference room, papers spread across the mahogany table. My doorbell camera caught the same Audi at 2 a.m. on 6 different nights when I was traveling for work. Russell leaned in, his tie loosened after hours of review. Timestamps? All between 1:30 and 3 a.m. Different guys, same pattern. I pulled up another file. And here's where it gets interesting. Each visit lines up with a withdrawal the next morning. 500 here, 800 there. The bank statements told their own story. Transaction after transaction, perfectly timed to those late-night visits. My father's old leather briefcase sat beside me, now stuffed with printouts instead of the construction contracts it used to hold. Dad's voice echoed in my head. "Numbers don't lie, son. They tell you exactly what someone values." "What about the messages?" Russell asked, reaching for his coffee. I hesitated. Reading them made my jaw clench, but I opened the folder anyway. Screenshots of conversations I wished I'd never seen filled the screen. Jessie coordinating meetups, discussing payments, juggling her schedule of deception. One guy wanted more money, another threatened to tell me everything. Her responses were cold, calculating. Nothing like the woman I thought I'd married. "The oldest ones go back 8 months, I said, my voice rough. A memory hit me. Last Christmas, Jessie insisting we needed separate phones for work privacy. I'd agreed, trusting her completely. The irony tasted like acid. My hands shook slightly as I organized another set of bank records. Dad used to say true strength wasn't about muscle. It was about being unshakable in your principles. Standing in his garage as a kid, learning to measure twice and cut once, I never imagined I'd apply those lessons to documenting my wife's betrayal. "We're building something solid here," Russell said, watching me label another folder. "But Finn," he waited until I looked up. "You know this is just the beginning. Jessie won't accept this quietly." I nodded, thinking of the growing stack of evidence. Each page felt like another brick in a wall of truth, protection against whatever storms were coming. The conference room lights hummed overhead as I sorted another batch of timestamps and transactions. "She'll try to twist this," Russell continued, his voice careful. "Make you doubt yourself, paint herself as the victim. You need to be ready for that conversation because it's coming." Looking at the evidence spread before us, the doorbell footage, the bank records, the desperate messages from her lovers, I felt something solid settle in my chest. Not anger anymore, just clarity. Dad would have understood. He always said tools were only as good as the hands wielding them, and truth was the strongest tool of all. I checked my watch, 11:42 p.m. "Let's organize one more batch," I said, reaching for another stack. "I want everything cataloged before she makes her next move." 3 days after our evidence-gathering session with Russell, I was making coffee when I heard Jessie's key in the lock. Her footsteps were hesitant, nothing like her usual confident stride. I kept my back turned, measuring grounds into the filter. The familiar scent reminded me of countless morning routines that now felt like scenes from someone else's life. "Finn?" Her voice wavered. "Can we talk?" I turned slowly, coffee scoop still in hand. Jessie stood in the doorway wearing the blue sweater she knew I liked, her eyes red-rimmed and glistening. Everything about her posture screamed vulnerability, the slight tremor in her hands, the way she hugged herself. It was a performance I'd seen before, but never recognized for what it was. "About what?" I kept my voice neutral, setting the scoop down. She moved closer, tears spilling now. "About that night. About everything. I know how it looked, but they're just friends, Finn. Nothing happened." My chest tightened at the blatant lie. The coffee maker gurgled behind me as Jessie inched forward, reaching for my hand. Her fingers were cold when they touched mine. "Please," she whispered. "You have to believe me. We can fix this." I pulled away and reached for the folder I'd purposely left on the counter. One by one, I laid out the bank statements, highlighting transfer after transfer. Next came the surveillance stills. Different men, different nights, all entering our home while I was away. The timestamps glowed accusingly in the corner of each image. "Friends don't drain accounts and sneak out of bedrooms," I said quietly. Jessie's face changed, tears vanishing like they'd never existed. Her spine straightened as she realized her act wasn't working. When she spoke again, her voice had an edge I'd never heard before. "If you push this," she said, each word precise, "I'll say you scared me." The threat hung in the air between us. My coffee sat forgotten, steam rising in the sudden chill. Without breaking eye contact, I reached into my pocket and pressed record on my phone, the same way I had that first night. "Say that again?" I kept my voice steady. Her eyes narrowed as she spotted the phone. We both knew what had just happened. Her threat was now evidence, another brick in the wall she'd built against herself. The silence stretched. Outside, a lawnmower droned, surreal in its normalcy. Jessie's lips pressed into a thin line as she realized her mistake. The mask of contrition was gone completely now, replaced by something harder, colder. She glared at me, hands clenched at her sides. I could almost see her recalculating, trying to find another angle of attack. But we both knew this moment couldn't be undone. Her threat was captured, preserved, ready to be played back for anyone who needed to hear it. I held her gaze, thumb still on the record button. In my father's house, there had been no room for lies. Now, standing in my own kitchen, I understood exactly why. The courthouse loomed ahead, all granite and steel. I adjusted my tie, remembering how my father taught me the Windsor knot in front of his bedroom mirror. "Looking sharp matters," he'd said, "but being sharp matters more." Russell met me at the entrance, briefcase heavy with evidence. His calm presence steadied my nerves as we walked through security. "Remember," he said quietly, "let the facts speak. That's all we need today." The hearing room felt smaller than I'd imagined. Jessie sat with her attorney, wearing a conservative black dress that screamed, "Wronged wife." She wouldn't meet my eyes. The judge, a silver-haired woman with reading glasses on a chain, called us to order. Russell presented our case methodically. Bank statements appeared on the projector screen, each transfer highlighted. Doorbell footage played silently, showing men entering our home at odd hours. Text messages scrolled past, their timestamps damning. Through it all, I kept my expression neutral, even as my hands clenched under the table. "Your Honor," Russell concluded, "we ask for immediate relief, freezing of joint accounts and exclusive occupancy of the marital home for my client." Jessie's attorney argued weakly about misunderstandings and context, but I could see the judge's expression hardening as she reviewed the evidence. When she looked up, her gaze was sharp. "The evidence of financial dissipation is concerning," she said. "I'm granting the temporary freeze on joint accounts." She turned a page in her notes. "Regarding occupancy, given the documented pattern of bringing unauthorized visitors into the home, I'm granting exclusive use to Mr. Myers pending final resolution." Relief hit me like a wave. Russell squeezed my shoulder as we stood. Jessie stormed out without a word, her attorney hurrying after her. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. That afternoon, I celebrated small at home with a cup of coffee. Real coffee, not the break room sludge from the courthouse. The autumn sun slanted through the kitchen window, warming the counter where I'd spread out some work files. Maybe things would finally... The doorbell rang. A man in a cheap suit stood on my porch, holding a thick envelope. "Finn Myers?" "Yes?" "You've been served." He thrust the envelope at me and turned away before I could respond. My coffee grew cold as I read through the emergency petition. Each page felt heavier than the last. Jessie claimed I'd threatened her during the kitchen confrontation, that I'd intimidated her friends, that I'd tampered with her phone, that I'd stolen money from our accounts. Every single word was a lie, but crafted just plausibly enough to demand investigation. My hands shook as I reached the final page. If even one of these allegations stuck, the morning's victories would evaporate. The house, the accounts, everything we just secured, gone. The petition crumpled slightly in my grip as the room seemed to tilt. Through the window, I could see my neighbor walking his dog, completely unaware that my world was imploding all over again. The paper's edges bit into my palms as another wave of betrayal crashed over me, darker and colder than the first. I gripped the edge of the witness stand, wood smooth beneath my fingers. The familiar scent of lemon polish and recycled air filled my lungs as I faced the judge. Behind her, sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across the courtroom floor. "Please state your name for the record," the clerk intoned. "Finn Myers." Russell stood, adjusting his tie. "Mr. Myers, could you walk us through the events of October 12th, specifically the kitchen conversation mentioned in Mrs. Myers' petition?" I kept my voice steady, just like we'd practiced. I was reviewing bank statements at the kitchen counter when Jessie approached me. She attempted to minimize her actions, claiming the men were just friends. When I presented evidence of the financial transfers, she threatened to falsely claim I had frightened her. "Did you record this conversation?" "Yes. I activated my phone's recorder the moment she made that threat." Russell nodded to the clerk, who played the audio. Jesse's voice filled the courtroom. "If you push this, I'll say you scared me." The timing matched perfectly with my bank statement presentation, destroying her claim that I had threatened her first. Jessie shifted in her chair, jaw tight. Her attorney whispered something, but she shook her head sharply. "Mr. Myers," Russell continued, "regarding the allegation that you tampered with Mrs. Myers' phone, where were you on the evening of October 15th? "At dinner with you and 3 other colleagues at Marino's downtown. We were discussing the case from 6 to 9 p.m. Russell presented credit card receipts and security footage from the restaurant. The exact time Mrs. Myers claims her phone was compromised. One by one, Russell dismantled each accusation. The supposedly stolen money? Bank records showed Jesse's own transfers to accounts I'd never accessed. The intimidated friends? Doorbell footage revealed them leaving voluntarily, without interaction from me. During cross-examination, Jesse's attorney tried to paint me as controlling. "Isn't it true you monitored Mrs. Myers' movements?" "No," I replied. "I installed our doorbell camera 3 years ago for package security. I only reviewed the footage after discovering multiple unauthorized visitors in our home." The questions continued, but I stayed anchored in truth. A memory surfaced of my father teaching me to fish, his voice calm. "Patience wins more battles than force ever could." When Jessie took the stand, her composed facade cracked under Russell's questioning. She contradicted her own petition's timeline twice. Her explanation for the financial transfers wandered between loans to friends and personal expenses, never quite landing. "Mrs. Myers," Russell asked, "can you explain why your petition claims Mr. Myers threatened you on October 12th at 7 p.m. when security footage shows you were actually at the Golden Gate Hotel until 11 p.m. that night?" Color drained from her face. She glanced at her attorney, who stared stonily ahead. The judge removed her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. Through the heavy silence, I heard the subtle tick of the wall clock. My future balanced on the next few moments. "I've heard enough," the judge said, leaning forward. "Before I rule on this petition," the judge's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "This petition is dismissed with prejudice. The court finds Mrs. Myers' claims not only unsubstantiated, but deliberately misleading." She fixed Jessie with a stern look that made me think of my third-grade teacher catching someone in a lie. "Furthermore," she continued, "evidence clearly shows dissipation of marital assets through unauthorized gifts and transfers. Mrs. Myers will assume sole responsibility for all debt related to these transactions." The judge paused, shuffling papers. "The postnuptial agreement stands. Mrs. Myers' claim to the property is void due to documented infidelity." Jessie's face twisted, that familiar mask of innocence cracking at the edges. Her attorney placed a restraining hand on her arm as she started to rise. "Mrs. Myers will vacate the premises within 48 hours, taking only personal belongings. No alimony will be awarded." The judge's gavel fell with a sharp crack. You know that moment when justice finally arrives? It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like exhaling after holding your breath underwater too long. Russell squeezed my shoulder as we left the courtroom. "It's done, Finn. You stood your ground." The aftermath unfolded like dominoes falling. Remember that binder of evidence we'd compiled? Turns out truth has a way of finding daylight. 2 days later, I got a call from a woman named Sarah. Her voice shook with rage as she introduced herself as James Morton's wife. "I found your number in the court records," she said. "Thank you for the evidence. James is sleeping at his brother's now." Within a week, Peter Davidson's wife had done the same thing. Their perfect suburban life imploded when she discovered the bank transfers matching hotel receipts. The third man, Michael Torres, lost his VP position when the company audit revealed he'd been misusing corporate funds to repay Jessie for her gifts. I still remember the headline in the business section: "Executive terminated after financial misconduct investigation." The fourth guy, Craig Reddings, had the furthest to fall. His girlfriend kicked him out of their apartment when she discovered the truth. Last I heard, collection agencies were circling him for debts he'd racked up, thinking Jessie would cover them. I didn't celebrate any of it. How could I? These were lives unraveling, families splintering. But there's a difference between wanting revenge and accepting consequences. My father taught me that actions cast shadows, and sometimes those shadows stretch far beyond what we expect. 2 days after the ruling, I watched from my office window as Jessie loaded the last of her clothes into her car. The morning sun caught her diamond ring, the one I'd worked overtime for a year to buy, as she yanked open the driver's door. She must have felt me watching because she turned, eyes blazing with familiar fury. The slam of her car door echoed through the quiet street. I didn't move as she gunned the engine, tires spitting gravel. The silence after she disappeared around the corner felt heavier than all the words we'd ever said to each other. The morning after Jessie left, I woke before sunrise. The house felt different, lighter somehow, like it could finally breathe again. I made coffee in my father's old percolator, the one that always reminded me of Sunday mornings growing up. The familiar aroma filled the kitchen as I stood at the window, watching dawn paint the sky in streaks of pink and gold. I'd driven to Walker's Garden Center the previous afternoon. The young maple sapling sat in its container by the front steps, waiting. My father always said a house needs a tree to watch over it. He'd planted one for every major milestone in our family's life. The soil turned easily under my shovel as I dug the hole, measuring carefully, just like Dad taught me. Twice as wide as the root ball fin. Give it room to spread its wings. His voice was so clear in my memory, I almost turned to check if he was standing behind me. You ever notice how physical work clears your head? There's something about the rhythm of it, the simple focus of doing one thing well. As I positioned the sapling, checking it from every angle to ensure it stood straight and true, I felt the last knots of tension in my chest begin to unwind. The sun climbed higher as I tamped down the soil, built up the water ring, and spread mulch in a perfect circle. Standing back, I studied my handiwork. The young tree wasn't much to look at yet, barely taller than me, but I could already picture it years from now, branches spreading wide over the yard, offering shade to whoever needed it. Time to get back to living, I murmured, gathering my tools. In the garage, my father's workbench stood exactly as he'd left it. I'd kept it that way through everything, his passing, the inheritance, the marriage, all of it. The morning light slanted through the window, catching the worn edges of his tools, each one hanging in its designated spot. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the brass key I had made that morning. Brand new, it gleamed like a gold coin. This was more than just a spare key. It was a promise to myself, a promise that what happened with Jessie would never happen again. The workbench's scarred surface held decades of memories. Saturday morning lessons in fixing everything from toasters to transmissions, quiet talks about becoming a man, and Dad's unchanging belief that dignity mattered more than dollars. I placed the key precisely in the center of the bench, letting the sunlight catch it. Looking at it there, I felt the full weight of what I'd protected. Not just the house and savings, though those mattered. I'd protected something bigger, my peace, my dignity, my right to choose what happened in my own life. The victories in court were important, sure. Getting to keep my home, my savings, watching justice catch up to everyone involved, it all mattered. But the real win? That was simpler. I'd faced chaos and chosen dignity instead of destruction. I'd honored the lessons my father taught me about strength being quiet but unshakable. Standing there in the garage, watching sunlight play across that brass key, I finally understood what Dad meant when he said, "Justice isn't revenge, it's choosing dignity over chaos." I believe stories such as this find us for a reason. If this one touches you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. In the meantime, there are 2 stories on the screen that are even better.